Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and you are very welcome to another video in my top 5 series. Now this is one that a lot of you have been waiting for. It's a video about my top 5 orchids, and today I'm collaborating with Matthew from the channel Hello Plant Lovers in Australia. So let's get on with the video. Welcome to this orchid video and welcome to the channel if you're new. I post videos about a vast range of plants, but I do have to tell you that I have a particular passion for orchids, and I feel I should start off by confessing by saying hello, I'm Rachel and I'm definitely an orchidaholic. I grow many orchids. I currently have 101 in my house, but Cattleyas are my real passion. But before we get into the top 5 orchids, let's say a big warm hello to Matthew all the way over there in Melbourne, Australia.
Hello Rachel, and hello to Rachel's subscribers. Thank you very much for having me, Rachel, in this top 5 orchid collaboration. I'm so excited to hear what your top 5s are going to be. But I'm even more excited to be collaborating with you because yours was the first channel I started to watch when I was trying to grow orchids here in Melbourne in Australia, because your conditions, strangely enough, although you're in Ireland, I'm in Australia, are quite similar. And your tips and insights about growing orchids either inside on the windowsill or half outside in summer in your greenhouse and inside in winter were exactly what I was looking for. So I'm very excited to be collaborating with you on a top 5 orchid video.
Getting in contact with you, Matthew, has been a real eye-opener because we all start out making orchid videos thinking of an audience that's closer to home, and yet you found my videos useful all the way over there in sunny Australia. Now, before we kick off with my top 5 orchids, I'm just going to give you a little rundown of my growing conditions because I grow mostly in a house. So the 101 houseplant orchids that I mentioned already are grown in a house on windowsills here in Ireland, and I don't use humidifiers. Mostly I don't use additional light. I don't even use humidity trays. I did originally use humidity trays, but we found there was a problem in that they were giving rise to mold on the walls, and it was either the humidity trays or a divorce. So I got rid of the humidity trays. Anyway, I have to tell you, have a grow light, 2 grow lights, because when you make YouTube videos, people offer you these things. But I really think that the orchids that are on the windowsills have done better than the ones under the grow lights. Having said that, this Perseviliana you see in front of you here is one that was flowered on the grow light. In summer, I often move my highlight orchids outdoors into a shaded greenhouse, and that helps in Ireland because our climate here is one where we often suffer from lack of light and lack of sun, and I have found that it helps a lot, especially with Cattleyas, to get them to bloom. Now, having said that, I haven't moved my plants out to the greenhouse in several years because the biggest problem there was slugs, and when I moved them back indoors again in autumn, it brought a whole load of slugs and pests with them, and just the inherent problems that went with that. So I also have a number of orchids which live permanently in the greenhouse, and these would be mostly cymbidiums, Disa orchids and Coelogene cristata, and these stay the whole of the time in the greenhouse, which is heated to a 5-degree minimum in winter, which is 41 Fahrenheit, and in summer those orchids go outdoors to a shaded position in the garden because it just gets too hot in the greenhouse. The exception to that is the Disa orchids, but we'll talk about them in a few minutes. You may guess they are among my favourites. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to my top 5 orchids, and we're going to start with number 5. My 5th favourite orchid is Oncidium sotuanum. Now, this plant is a vision in spring with many sprays of tiny pink flowers that just clothe the whole plant in the most magnificent display. This plant is the parent of the Twinkles, the Twinkle series. You see so many of them for sale in various garden centres, and so many orchid growers grow these. But normally, I have to say, I'm a big fan of hybrids in general, but in this case, I prefer the species, and I do think that Oncidium sotoana has a certain elegance that the smaller Twinkles generally don't have. Now, I grow sotoanum in my house on a windowsill. Let me see, an east or west facing windowsill. South facing if it's available, not always available, and it's kept in a cool room. So in winter this cool room would have a nighttime minimum of 12 degrees sometimes, which is about 53 Fahrenheit, and with that cool night temperature in winter, it always kickstarts this beautiful plant into flower in spring.
And your number 5 is Oncidium sotoatum, and it just so happens, Rachel, ta-da, here is my plant that I also have. I've got one spike and another spike coming. I too love this orchid, and for me it is incredibly easy to grow. I keep mine outside under cover all year, and it is such a prolific bloomer. So this is probably another month away from all the flowers opening, but it is spectacular and pendulous, so I can really understand why you love it. I do too. I must say though, everyone says they're very fragrant. Last year was the first year mine flowered, and not a hint of a scent was there to be had.
So glad to hear that you too are a member of the Sotoanum fan club, Matthew. An absolutely wonderful plant, but what a pity it doesn't have a scent for you, because one of the big selling points of this plant is its beautiful sweet fragrance that really wafts around the room. And all I can say is that what often happens with orchids is that the first flowering isn't representative. So I feel you really need to wait until the second or even the third flowering to see the plant's full potential. I bet when that spike opens for you, it is going to be beautifully scented. Mark my words.
All right, what could your number 4 be?
My 4th favourite orchid is right here in front of me now, and this is Iwanagarra apple blossom. This is a fantastic Cattleya that just is an absolute spectacle when it's in flower. I also love the flower shape. Many hybrids, I find, have a kind of amorphous form to them, very rounded, yet this one has maintained the integrity of, I guess, one of the species parents. It's a beautiful one that I grow on an east-facing window because the south-facing window is full up with slightly fussier Cattleyas. It is potted in large orchid bark. I water it once a week. I feed it with orchid fertilizer, whichever one I'm using at the time, and it flowers for me beautifully once a year. I absolutely love it. Had this one for 6 years. Now, the only disadvantage is that no scent.
Iwanagarra apple blossom, and look at mine. Oh my goodness, I did go back, Rachel, and look at some of your older videos showing yours. What an amazing plant, but what a beautiful flower. What do you think? How long is this going to take to get to a blooming size? And I don't have much luck with sort of Cattleya types either. So anyway, Rachel, whatever you might be able to offer in regards to this, I would happily take on board.
What a cute little Iwanagarra, Matthew. Now, personally, I don't grow seedling plants anymore, so I'm not going to be drawn into the fool's game of speculating as to when that particular one is going to flower. But what I can tell you as useful tips is to keep it in good light and to feed it with whatever orchid fertilizer you use. Also to watch out for pot size. Now, we all know that Cattleyas need to be, or like to be, tight in their pot. They like to feel the edges of the pot, and if you overpot them, it's usually a recipe for disaster. But with seedlings, it's a little bit different, and you do have to keep up with the plant's requirements by potting on whenever it's necessary. So I do hope that that one will do well for you and get on and flower.
What could number 3 be?
So moving on to my third favourite orchid, and I'm going to have to clear the decks just a little bit to bring in this one to show you. Oops, there goes a root. And here we have my Dienes. For my third favourite orchid, I've chosen the South African beauties known as Dienes. Some of my Dienes are now in bloom, and what unusual flowers they have. You may note that they're sitting in water, rainwater. This is a bog orchid, and like similar conditions to Sarracenia, the North American insectivores, if you know them. They're potted in 50% peat and 50% perlite, and the pots sit in rainwater. The plants are sensitive to water purity, so I collect rainwater for them and just top up the trays. They live in the greenhouse 24/7 and tolerate a 5-degree minimum in winter, which is 41 Fahrenheit, and I keep them moist but not wet in winter. They have a funny life cycle where the plant dies after flowering but sends up new growths and takes about 2 years to reflower. I love these little plants because they're low maintenance. You just need to keep their water topped up. Perhaps I grow mine in too much light, but they do well. I know that in conditions of less light, they may get different colorations to the flowers. Some of my blooms, for example, my oranges, are supposed to be yellow, but they're a bit bleached out. I know a lot of people find these orchids hard, but I honestly can't figure out why.
Dienes. Rachel, I have also cheated and gone back and looked at some of your very early videos with your Dienes orchids. I first heard about them not that long ago actually, and given that they're South African, a lot of South African plants love southern Australia, I just assumed they'd be really easy to find here, but I cannot find a single seller who sells Dienes orchids in Australia, so I am so envious and jealous. And they are such a beautiful, such a simple, such an elegant flower, and yours look amazing. So all I can offer on the Dienes front is jealousy. All right, what's number 2?
And now we move on to my second favourite orchid of all time, and it's a Cattleya, one called CG Rubling. A fantastic, beautiful plant that isn't with me anymore, so we're going to look at footage of when I did have it. Now, CG Rubling is a primary cross between Gaskeliana and Cattleya Porporata, both of which I grow. Now the result of this pairing is a beautiful hybrid that has 2 things going for it. One of which is the fact that it has maintained the flower shape of its Porporata parent. Beautiful, slender tepals and petals, a gorgeous looking plant. It's fragrant, it's big, it produces spikes reliably. But the result of this one being a hybrid is that it doesn't spread as much as its species parents. So it's maintained in quite a small pot, which is definitely an advantage if you're trying to grow it on a windowsill. Now, what I absolutely love is plants that give it a lot of welly. So when they're in flower, they're completely in flower. And this particular one certainly does this. I absolutely love it. I love the fact that when it's in flower, you practically can't see the leaves. There's just so much going on in terms of flower, and the compact size make it an absolute winner in my books.
Cattleya Rubling Sentinel. Oh, I can completely understand why that is your number 2. I must say, I also like that particular shape of Cattleya flowers. I'm not that into the more hybrid, very frilly, very round flowers. I much prefer those sort of more elegant blooms. And yours is stunning. I did also cheat and go back and look at your earlier videos. And it was your Cattleya videos, Rachel, that I first started to watch. And so I'm going to blame you for what I'm about to show you, Rachel. This is my Cattleya. Oh my goodness. Now, look at the size of this thing. I bought this as a seedling, maybe 4 years ago, when I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about orchids, did everything wrong. It was in too much shadow and blah, blah, blah. And I must say, I've totally neglected it. It has had over the time mealybugs, it's been dropped, it had some kind of weird rot that went on. I chopped that off and it keeps growing. some bizarre insect decided it wanted to nest in that leaf apex there and eat it. Anyway, but it grew and it grew and it grew. Look at the size of it. It is a beast of a plant, never a flower. So Rachel, I really need to know, although I've watched all your videos, what is the trick? And you know what? When we were talking about this collaboration, I looked at this orchid a little bit more, and that is what it is called. It's called Cattleya flammea. And I actually did a bit of research about it, which I hadn't done, which is foolish of me, and discovered that both its parents are actually cool to warm growing Brazilian Cattleyas. So I just thought, you know what, I'm so sick of this doing nothing. I'm just going to banish it outside. It's in exile. So it's hanging, it's in quite bright light, but it's outdoors now all year. So it's taking our winter and nighttime minimums. And look what is occurring in here. Is that or is that not a viable flower sheath? We will see, Rachel. I will follow up. But any Cattleya tips? What do you do? What's the secret? This beast should have bloomed by now.
Matthew, congratulations! What a healthy looking plant. And there it has a sheath. You've done it. It's going to flower. Now, why is it so big? Some plants genuinely just are bigger. The fact that this is actually a primary cross, like my CG Rubling, may mean that it has a less compact nature than a genuine hybrid might have had. So I always think when people are looking to start growing Cattleyas, there are two main things to look out for. Look out for a true hybrid, and also look out for one that is already flowering size, because that's how you learn, and those are the two things that are going to pretty much give you the best chance of success that you can. I also note that on your plant the leaves are a kind of like a lighter green, which is just exactly what's needed for the plant to bloom. We all know the old story. You have a Cattleya and it has dark green leaves and you think how healthy it looks. Well, it may be that the plant is healthy, but it's not going to flower if it's not getting enough light. It needs to be an unsightly shade of green in order for it to flower. That's just the way Cattleyas are. But congratulations, it looks fantastic. And even if that sheath aborts or doesn't produce a flower, it means your plant is on the way to flowering. So even if it doesn't flower this year, I bet it'll flower for you next year.
Anyway, I am now keen to see, Rachel, what your number one is.
Okay, finally, we move on to my number one plant. And this one's a monster. And guess what? It's a Cattleya. Let me just go get that for you. And here we have Cattleya Porporata. Quite a big plant. It's not its best flowering this year, so we're going to look at now footage from previous years. So this is a parent to the CG Rubling, my second favourite orchid that we just talked about, and it flowers magnificently for me every June, once a year. I love it for its fabulous spectacle, its beautiful flowers and its fragrance. But this isn't a plant for the faint-hearted. It takes forever to reach flowering size and it's just so damn big. My poor plant is, however, at the maximum size that I can allow it, because it's a challenge to get this beast onto a windowsill. The result is that now it's a bit neglected, and it should have been repotted last year, which is why it's kind of growing out all over the place, and it hasn't done so well in terms of flowering this year. Also, when plants are stressed, they tend to pick up bugs, and mine has scale. What I'm going to have to do is, after this one finishes flowering, after it starts into regrowth, I'm going to have to divide it. Wish me luck.
Ah, Cattleya Porporata. Now I can again completely see why you love that. The flowers are exquisite, but Rachel, once again, I am a complete failure with Cattleya, so whatever tips you have. But I can show you this, which is a Laelia, which is called, it's a hybrid called Rosy Tiger, which I bought as a reasonably large plant, and this is the first year it's ever flowered for me, so I feel as though I might be getting somewhere with that Cattleya type of orchid. But anyway, I'm very happy with that. Rachel, thank you so much for letting me collaborate with you on this wonderful top 5 orchid videos, and I look forward to showing you my top 5, and I've decided that my top 5 are all going to be ones that grow outside all year for me, which means they're just easy to grow. I can be a little lazy. Rachel, thank you so much. Thank you to your subscribers, and I look forward to hearing what you think about my top 5.
Thank you, Matthew, for joining with me in this collaboration. It's been an absolute pleasure. Now we're going to see what your top 5 orchids are. So I'm going to link up here to your video on your channel where you talk about your top 5 orchids. And I'm also going to put the link in the description on this one down below. Please, everybody, if you've stayed this far in the video, if you've watched this far, then it means you're an absolute orchid nut, just like us, and you really need to go and check out Matthew's channel and subscribe, because the more information we get, the better. And yeah, so thank you everyone for watching, and I will finish by letting you know that we have 2 more videos coming your way. So on Sunday you can expect a video on 3 excellent perennial plants for beginners, and then this time next week on the Thursday you can expect a full Douentza garden tour, not with the Cattleya there. I'll have moved it by then. So lots of peonies and many things to see, probably at least a half-an-hour video. So check back for that. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to go and check out Matthew's channel and subscribe to him, and I will see you on Sunday. Bye.